Okay, I'll just quickly introduce you, as is the custom. Hello everybody. Talk to you, Joanne. Thank you all for coming, and it's a real pleasure to welcome Flora, who is an alumnus of Monash, did a PhD here. When did you finish?
2008.
2008.
Convert 2009, yeah.
Yeah. And now she's a very successful lecturer at RMIT, doing some really fantastic work, which is why we thought we'd invite her back, just to renew old acquaintances, but also to hear about all the exciting work that she's been doing. Welcome Flora, thank you so much for coming out to visit us, and we're really looking forward to what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. To be honest with you, when I was actually invited to this, I'm sort of like, wow, it's exciting to be back in Monash, but I'm also a bit confused about what to talk about, because there could be, I've got quite a rich, different experience in the past few years after I finished my PhD. So I might actually start with explaining different things that I'll talk about. So these are some of the things that I'll discuss today in terms of urban computing, tangible and embedded interactions, organic user interface, and also some analysis and visualization. And to give you a reason why I've got a whole gamut of research, well, I haven't moved around much. I've only been in Melbourne since I did my PhD. But yeah, I did my PhD in the SSE, and that time it was on context-aware computing, data mining, and collision pattern recognition. And the domain applications actually road safety. And we work with sensor data. Some of them are simulated from smartphones. No, there was a smartphone at the time. I'm lying. So that's actually Nokia Symbian OS data. We just use with accelerometer data and some GPS data. And for about a bit close to 5 years, I was a postdoc in SIO. So I completely changed my research area. 2008, that time it wasn't that easy to find a job because of GFC. So it was really hard to find a job that was very relevant to my research. So I jumped ship, and I was working with architects and engineers, still working with sensor data, but completely different purposes. So with a lot of different kind of data coming from buildings and construction and architecture design, service design and all that, there are a couple of things I had to do. I was a postdoc as well / software engineer / troubleshooter / hacker, everything. So I did all things from parametric design to visualization to responsive real-time feedback system, tangible interfaces, and organic user interface used in buildings. So the domain architecture and construction and urban design. And then the turnaround for me was 2013, when I've got an ARC and I've got an APDI fellowship, which was, I think, the last round of APD and APDI that year, 2012. So I've got an APDI, and I started working in CS and IT, and started moving back to the area of my research in when I was PhD. So again, looking at context-aware computing, but now the data is much more richer. When I was in my PhD, I simulated a lot of data because you can't really crash cars. But in this, from 2013 until now, I've been working with real-world data. I've been working with a lot of sensor data coming from the road, coming from mobile sensors, and all kinds. So that's sort of an overview of my research. But if you look at the domain underneath, it's all to do with cities. It's all to do with urban computing. So that's why my passion is really with data, like spatial temporal analytics, and how to actually use it to inform users, to give feedback to users. At the same time, you might be able to create some interactional opportunities in a way that if you can embed that into the user interaction. Recently, I published a paper with Usman Haq. I'm not sure if you know Usman Haq. Yes, you will know him, obviously, in this lab. So this was a collaboration that started in 2013 when I was still in SIO. I invited him to, I think 1 or 2 days workshop with him, and we really talk about, urban computing in the world. It's really urban computing for massive cities. Can you actually think about all these different wonderful technologies that we have, what sort of participation and engagement and interactional opportunities that we can create with all these things. So that was recently published in AJ and HCS. So that actually gives a lot of different taxonomy of interaction in urban spaces. So you're welcome to have a look. I'll just give you a quick overview. We see that cities are very complex, dynamic, and also messy, but at the same time it's very exciting because cities are not, they're all very different. It's very dynamic, the sort of, there are patterns happening in the morning, in the afternoon, it's all different. Cannot be really designed with one size fits all or one system adapts to all. So it's highly contextual. So urban computing, we think it's, we borrow this definition from Eric Paulus in his paper in 2008, that urban computing explores a wider gamut of urban lives. It's from personal, social to solitary to the crowd. But it's emphasizing connectivity, but also celebrating this connect. Like, can you actually create some element of surprises with the dynamics in urban computing? And we want to use all these different technologies. There's a lot of jargons there. Ubiquitous computing. We know this term has been coined by Mark Weiser in the early 90s from Xerox PARC Lab. And we do live in the era of ubiquitous computing right now. And with all these different devices in our life, what sort of interactional opportunities we could create? And I really like the word in the wild because it is in the real context of cities as living lab, situated within public spaces, facilitating open interactions. And another thing I'd like to actually talk about today is not just interactional opportunities, but also knowledge discovery opportunities in urban computing. And why is that? Well, according to Cisco, with the Internet of Everything, 37 billion new things will be connected by 2020, right? We've got smart shoes, we've got smart pill, we've got smart home, we've got smart self-driving car, we've got all these things. And I'm sure you guys here have been working with open source electronics, and these have been in placed in the hands of even non-experts. Like I really like that picture on the right-hand side where there's a florist who sells flowers with this sort of prototype where this thing actually treats the moisture value of the bouquet. So so the data that's been created from all these Internet of Things objects, and there are a lot of them that are actually off the shelf that people can just buy. And I just quickly show you this. This is a work by Osman Khan as well. This is a search engine for Internet of Things. If you can see, every single dot on that map is a thing connected to the internet. So it all actually has so much data, right? And the thing is, it could be anything. It could be a weather station. It could be a sensor connected to attached to my cat. It could be a ship in Baltic Sea. It could be anything, right? So therefore, there's a lot of opportunities here. For knowledge discovery is one, but also second, if you actually give all this rich information back to the user, how will the user react? So proliferation of smartphones, and the thing is, we have become sensors, human sensors, because we have been sent by this wonderful little embedded devices in our phones. Just a quick quiz. How many of you know that? How many of you know how many sensors there are in the latest iPhone?
Exactly.
Yeah. How many channels? How many data channels?
It's got to be at least 10, right?
Yeah. 27.
27. Okay.
Samsung Galaxy S4.
Less.
45.
45.
What?
Yeah. Actually, in S5 it's a bit less because they lose the temperature and humidity sensor. So I've done some experiments myself. I've collected some data myself, like monitoring myself, monitoring my students. So it's wonderful. You can start, capturing all this data that actually captures phenomena of people's lives, right? Phenomena of people's life, phenomena of the environment, and what do you do with this data, right? How would you, let's say if it's exposed to other people, would you actually, create some interaction opportunities or knowledge discovery opportunities? So these are the things we have in mind. A lot of other data, so non-structured data coming from social networks. So, we've got so much data right now that we can think of. And there's a lot of other different technology that you can use. Not only that display has become much closer to us, but it can also become more public, where you can start exposing information to the user and allowing them to actually create some, engagement or social engagement in public space. Interestingly, I'm not sure if you noticed, but a lot of public displays, even in shopping malls, they have those cameras on the screen. I'll just show you that. Oops. Here. So a lot of them has cameras. You can notice it. I mean, if you go to Westwood malls or maybe Chatston, just pay attention on. They may have not done anything with it, but they could be in the future, right? Oh, I know it's a male approaching it, a high school age. I could actually push some advertisement back to the user, because I know this person is coming every Friday night. Things like that, right? And also media facade. All this time is all to do with artistic displays, but you could actually display information there, right? You can make it more interactive and more informative at the same time. And not only displays becoming larger and more public, but also it becomes much closer and much more intimate with all these different variables. So one question we ask about ourselves is interaction opportunities, how to promote large-scale participation and citizen engagement. So that's one of the things that we discussed in that paper. And we actually looked at, we come up with this taxonomy of interaction and participation in urban computing. In the scale of level participation, we want to know, what sort of level, is it individual or is it group participation, in terms of participation scale, and how the manipulation actually is provided, is it revealed, is it disclosed, and what sort of effects is actually, what sort of mechanisms of the effects, is it actually hidden or is it surprising, and the sort of interaction modes and also interaction scale. Just to give you a bit more idea, that's the taxonomy that we come up with. So we actually look at all these words, big words like crowdsourcing, crowdsensing, urban probes, interactive public display, and all these different words that people have used in urban computing, and the sort of technologies being used in these different activities, and the sort of level of participation, whether somebody is actually aware they're actually participating, and they might actually give their consent, right? Or they may not, right? And whether they're actually highly engaged or not. And looking at participation scale, whether it's local participation or it's a global participation. We're looking at the methods of manipulation as well, whether it's actually hidden. For example, we talk about affordance in interaction design a lot, right? But with all these different technology, you might actually hide the affordance. People not actually aware that they can do something with that object, and then you might actually then reveal the effects. It's sort of like things like, for example, public installation, right? Some public installation could look very normal. You don't really know it's you can manipulate something with it, but then the effects is could be revealed or amplified. And what sort of interaction goal you want to achieve. Is it private interaction, or you want it situated in a space, or you want a public interaction? And in terms of interaction scale as well. So these are the things that we study in that paper. Just quickly show you some of the case studies in our past projects. So this is previous work in 2011. So during that time, I worked a lot on tangible tables. Not anymore. So that time I got really excited with this because Kinect just came out in 2010, I think. We were one of the earliest groups who actually used Kinect. That time we couldn't find any source whatever to actually hack Kinect to turn a normal table become a tangible table. So what we did in 4 days, we come up with these 4 different tangible tables that we hacked from, you know, putting a hole on a table or a normal table, and we just use some image processing. Several things that we did, so you can. The main thing about this is how do we actually help people in the city, let's say urban planners or even citizens, aware that there's so much data in their city. So we actually pull data from Foursquare, we pull data from Yahoo traffic, open traffic data. This was done in Copenhagen. So we run this workshop with a brief that, guys, let's work on these installations. And on the 5th day, there was a gallery, open gallery. So people, anybody from in Copenhagen could come. So we specifically invited the city planners and all that, and also some people with families and kids. So they become more aware of the sort of data they're generating in social media and in traffic and all that. So see if any of these is could work. Does the video work? Okay. Yeah. So this is an example of the data that we extracted from local weather station, and we wanted to know this area is very windy, so we want to know if there's new development, how would that actually affect the wind. So this is an example of a project that actually then we expanded further. So the data here, although the wind flow is simulated, but the actual parameter to the simulation was coming from real-time sensor data. So it's a computational fluid dynamic simulation. And then the nice thing about that is, with this project, a lot of people started to see that there's a lot of value in this type of open data, like even in Copenhagen, they really like this, and even we saw kids playing with this, and they started interacting, and which is impossible if you don't do it, if you don't create this interaction opportunity, because around the same table they've got expert, they've got wind engineer, they've got urban planners, they've got families with kids talking about the same problem, which is a hard problem for urban planning. And so we replicated that in Melbourne. We did that again, and this time we use a more high fidelity 3D models. So this is a scaled down 3D models of RMIT. So RMIT and City Bath, that's Swanson Street. So this was the yeah, and some of the building blocks can be moved around. So we did we had 2 different type of experiment here. We opened it up in a gallery during Melbourne Knowledge Week, so people could actually come and see the phenomenon of wind. And ironically, when we did this coincides with the tragic event of the wall collapsing on Queensberry, if you remember that. So it is a very windy area. And due to all this different construction, it changes the wind phenomena in the area. So using this kind of tool, normally, if you actually have to do wind simulation, the whole engineering, wind engineering and simulation will take maybe 1 week. It's a very expensive process. If you want to do it in wind tunnel, for example, it could be maybe $15,000 to $20,000. But this is a crude tool that even I think we had another session where we actually allow this group, urban planners, construction managers, to actually test the tool, and they can actually play with the different building forms and see the different effect and understanding it and creating some conversation right away in the area. So that's sort of like having this kind of interactional opportunity in the lab. But another thing that we looked at is now if you actually bring all these different engagement out in the public, like if people have understanding that somehow they could capture data about their movement and their interaction and then bring it back to the public, what sort of interaction opportunity that could be created. So we're looking at, we run studios to create these different installations. So this is an example of, if the video could work. No, it didn't work, sorry. So this was done by transdisciplinary group of students from textile design to public arts and to architecture and interior design. So we actually had an experiment of several interactive adaptive architecture on Swanson Street that was installed over 2 days to 1 week. So it actually, and we recorded the experiment, and we actually noticed there's huge, a lot more foot traffic, and not just foot traffic, but also new conversations happening among the pedestrians about the different things, and they started engaging. The next thing that we were looking at that we also very interested in is, this is again work from my time in SIO, working with architects and engineers. And this is a work of one of my PhD students back then. We look at kinetic organic interface. So what we mean by kinetic organic interface is interface that's organic is they can come in any shape or form. So it's not only LED based, it's not only display based, it can be anything, right? But when it's kinetic, that means it's also shape changing. So Ivan Popper and Hiroshi Ishii had this paper about kinetic interaction that, they proposed this could be one of the things one of the big things in the future, because you're no longer interacting with information coming through the screen, but you can interact with anything around you. It could be a wall, it could be a ceiling, and all this actually not just giving you or display information, but it might also change its shape to actually adapt or trying to convey some message. Have you actually seen this before? Aegis hyposurface?
I have.
Yeah, so I would say that's one of the first kinetic organic interface, it's large scale. So my previous boss in SAO is actually Mark Barry. So Mark Barry is one who, he's one of those architects designing this. So in here, this was a work we published in UBCom 2013, work by my PhD student. What we actually propose here is a new kind of multifunctional material system. It's not just about, because a lot of these kinetic organic interface is still very rigid, it's still display based. Like if you could see this thing here, the tilt display, it's still LED based, right? But what we actually want to do is, can we make something more organic? And what we design here is a material that has both, that has all the three: sensing capacity, foam changing capacity, as well as luminous capacity. So the sensing capacity is a few things. We embed light sensing, proximity sensing, so touch sensing as well as proximity sensing through capacitive sensing, and we use SMA for foam changing capacity. And in terms of luminous capacity, it can become a passive lighting, and when the lux level goes down below, I think 10 or something, then it will become an active lighting. So the thing about this, the whole idea about this kinetic organic interface is it's actually modular. So the capacity on the sensing capacity could be scalable, and at the same time, what we try to replicate here, you know, capacitive sensing is something that you can, let's say you can interact with your phone and you can interact with these, right? It's capacitive sensing, but we want to replicate that through this material. So we, and not only that, it will change its shape. I wish I can show you a video. Okay. So this whole thing could be, this is an example of interaction. You could actually, you know, program it in whichever way. So we were thinking of, let's say this could be a bus shelter, where, you know, it could actually let you know about the weather, maybe, you know, if it takes a real-time data input, and then it actually might fault when it's actually, you know, going to rain soon or something like that. So you can design it whichever way. And we installed it in some unusable space, and we saw that definitely it actually increased interaction around the space, and it also increased the you know, people actually, the stay time around the space is actually much higher than before. So people actually staying around this dark unusable space and talking about it, and they were actually playing with it. So at first, some people they didn't realize that this thing could move. They just thought, oh, it's something. But when actually somebody walked past and actually moved and changed shape, somebody could say, hey, it's moving, and they actually went back and talked about it, and they actually started talking and creating some interaction opportunity. So those are the things about interaction opportunity. Now, I'm happy to stop and take a question on that before I move on to knowledge discovery opportunity.
So, well, I take a quick. So the one with the screens on it, what does it do that the screen can't do? I mean, I know it folds. So the example that you had there, I'm just,
which one?
The early example, yeah.
This one?
Yeah, the tilt display. What was that built for?
So this was from Hiroshi Ishii's group.
Yeah.
I know that there's a horrible example, to be honest with you. Well, they actually think that you could then actually show things in a more, if there are things that are more two-dimensional, right? And that's actually not so organic.
Mm.
I mean, that really fits their, I mean, it doesn't actually convey the message that it is actually organic.
Mm.
I mean, perhaps the other.
So I know, like the Media Lab recently did something similar to that, the Felix, in an updated version of
right,
that,
yeah.
Which allowed you to basically communicate with people by fields remotely. So you had one person of one location, another person another. You could get haptic or tactile feedback. But I'm just wondering, I mean, 'cause all these things, they sound really interesting, but I'm still confused as to what the purpose that you can actually use them for. They seem to be a sort of solution looking for a problem.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That, you know, it's like this great technology, and then you can embed things into materials, and there's a lot of potential for it to be used for purposes, but I'm still waiting to hear what the compelling purpose is that you want to build it for. I know
Yeah.
everything doesn't have to be
Yeah.
a solution to something.
Exactly.
Or, you know, it can just be practice or experimental.
It could be, I mean, those sort of things could be tested. I mean, I think what's missing as well is the actual putting it really, like, you know, unfortunately that project, we actually went to public transport, PTV, and they were initially were very keen about this, and they wanted to actually test it out in some of the bus shelters to actually start communicating back to people, because the thing is, people have now becoming more, I mean, there's so much display around our life now that they no longer pay attention, you know. So I think there's the term called interaction blindness. There's somebody in public display research say this is a problem now, is interaction blindness. No, sorry. Yeah. Well, the first thing, they don't know they could actually interact with it. The second is, even if they don't care about it, but if we can start creating these ambient technologies that not just you know, attracting attention, but also start communicating. I think that'll be the motivation, you know, like giving feedback to people that, you know, I mean, when we actually talk about this different scenario, I mean, the people in PTV say, oh, it'll be really nice if we can tell them that, you know, the next bus is coming in 5 minutes, but there's another bus there. If you actually run, not only you burn some calorie, but it's coming in 2 minutes, and you know, and it could actually change color, because if it's in the display, you can't really see it. So, or it might communicate something.
Understand that though.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is also, like you say about the blindness to, I mean, because there's already displays on all the tram stops to tell you the next tram is coming. But you can imagine all sorts of other experiences that aren't perhaps quite so didactic or just informational, that have some other qualities like curiosity, playfulness, all those kinds of things.
Yeah,
that actually make a more engaging experience for the person waiting for the tram or the bus or whatever. And I guess it's how you balance that between providing informational service, because there's plenty of ways to provide information directly as figures or numbers or instructions. But this seems to be something different that adds something not in informational terms, but in other terms, in terms of the physicality of the interface, in terms of the fact that it's kinetic and moving, unusual and playful and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I guess it's more, maybe it's more a design issue about how you balance that with.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point.
But is it also about putting in the hands of the user the access to the information? Because I had an example this morning where a train was cancelled, yet they weren't actually telling the customer service person, so she could tell us that it was cancelled. And so it's actually having these kinetic services or other kinds of things, meaning you can control the information that you're getting off their systems, rather than being drip fed what they want to tell you.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. In here, that's one thing that we also, in terms of the design thinking, is the sort of affordance, sort of whether the interface is controlled by, whether users will then have a more sense of the controlling the interface, rather than it's just pushing the information. It's not really engaging. So this actually will create some, new interaction opportunity where. Ku, the architect on this, this is really modular, because the previous one was very rigid, and it's all, as you said, working on all those different joints that have to be moved, and it's, in terms of energy, it's also very expensive, energy that's consumed. Well, this one is not. So he also think about that in terms of consideration, how to make it more sustainable, and how can it be driven by the environment, really. Because it's actually, the way he designed the material, it also absorbs energy and heat. So, and the next thing I would like to talk about is how to extract actionable knowledge to improve user experience. So this is the knowledge discovery opportunity from data, because data is the new oil. but it's like oil refinery. You need to know how to drill the oil, right? In order for you to get into the oil. And a lot of people talk about big data as 4V, volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard about these terms. It's not just big because of the volume, but also it's changing all the time. It's very dynamic. The data sources are different, and there's a lot of uncertainty as well. But I think when designers come into play because of the 5V. If you look at the 5V, which is value, that's really where I think designer can play a role. I talk to a lot of companies who have lots of data, and they really don't know what to do with the data. Like we store all this data just because we know we can. You know. I talked with one big airport, one real top, well-known top airport in the world. They've got every data they can collect from, not just from the Wi-Fi, but also from the toilet. When does the toilet actually need cooling? How much people actually interact with the screen on the toilet, whether you actually like the toilet or whether it's clean or not. All these things is actually collected. But I said, then what do you do with the data? We don't know yet. It's interesting. So this is where value comes to play, and this is where I think when we actually start discovering knowledge and we start pushing them back to the user, we need to start, those two things come to play. So not just opportunity to extract actionable knowledge, but also again interactional opportunity. Can you actually get users to start understanding about the data they generate and contribute to the community at the same time, creating more knowledge about it. So sorry for the bad slide, I'm not sure why. Well, have you seen this big data quadrant before? So yeah, this came from World Economic Forum in Davos. So with big data, previously with just large data, you could actually explore the data and you'll be able to know the question that you like to ask. But now with big data, sometimes you no longer know the question to be asked. So that's why it's very important to actually provide a data-driven knowledge discovery, right? So I just want to give you a brief overview of several ways for us to start exploring the question. Of course, we could use visual analytics. In the past, this is an example of visualization I did with some of the guys in Copenhagen. And this was included in Business Review Weekly 3 years ago, where we can actually use this sort of data and help transport planning to be linked with cafes. Like for example, if I know the train's about 10 minutes away or 15 minutes away, and I know this person is really love to have a piccolo, just a quick piccolo, then you can actually send messages about well, you can actually grab some coffee before you actually get on your train or things like that. So you could actually start visualizing data. So we visualize these public transport delays in Melbourne, in Adelaide. But visualization itself is not enough, because visualization is actually created and it's a final product. You can't really explore the question. It's sort of like you have a fixed question, which is what does a public transport delay look like in Adelaide, right? So that's why I'm working with visual analytics. This was a project funded by Orin. I delivered this tool to Orin early this year. So I was hoping they could release it. If it's released, then you could actually play with it. We've got lots of different data from Adelaide, Melbourne, Brisbane, and the data is very heterogeneous, not just batch, but also real-time data streams. And we want to actually create some dashboard in a way that urban planners could actually interact with the platform. it's multidimensional in a way that you can actually interact with it on a time matrix, and also so there's a color matrix, height matrix, and time sliders. And in here, for example, and you can choose a lot of different data set and the actual dimension you're interested in, and you can extract some statistical features on the data set, and then you display it. So this is when you actually don't know the question, because we are not experts, we are not transport experts, but can we actually start exposing these different features from different data and just get them to actually interact with it. So in here, for example, it reveals area where it has commercial land use, so commercial land use. So you can see the different color of distribution of the land use. The area is has high land use, and also transport frequency. So in this, for example, this area has really good public transport provision with commercial land use. Well, that one is, it's not that great. So obviously, if you actually give this to urban developers, they know that they won't actually, although there's a high density of commercial land use here, they shouldn't develop anything there, because in terms of transport, it's really bad, right? So this sort of a question that could be explored, like we have mechanisms to actually redistribute the, because the data is very heterogeneous. Different data set, different dimension could have different distribution, right? So the distribution may not be normally distributed, so it may not be Gaussian or whatever, but it could be, there could be one with a really long tail distribution. So how will we actually then visualize this? Because if you actually visualize it normally, you might not be able to see the outlier area. So we come up with new redistributed algorithm as well for this. So there's another example. And it's all running on the browser. And you could do some ranking as well. So let's say if you give this to the hand of end user, let's say I want to live in a suburb that has, and I have certain budget. I don't want to exceed. I don't want to exceed my budget in buying a certain property, and I want to travel within half an hour each day. And I study at University of Adelaide. Give me all these different regions and rank them. So we have this region ranking algorithm as well in this platform. And you could actually then parameterize. You could actually parameterize your objectives. If, let's say, you are end users, you're somebody from public, or you're actually somebody from urban planning or whatever. Now, the next thing is putting data into context, and I think this is a big thing for me. If you actually, do you have, how much time do I have?
About 7 minutes. 7
minutes, okay. I have to really skim through that. Yeah, I think when I talk about data as a new oil, and for me, my way of drilling into that oil is always putting data into context. Because context is actually could be used to characterize the situation. So the first thing I always do is look at the data distribution and look at what sort of contextual features I can actually extract out of the data. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. So you could actually look at identity or location-based context, time-based context, activity context, and all that. So maybe I don't have much time to talk about this. So putting data into context. One example is, for example, you've got lots of data on your smartphones, right? And what we want to know is risky driving behavior, right? And for that, that's actually an anomaly. So we treat that as an anomaly, and we want to actually provide information back to contextual information back to the users about their behavior, and at the same time giving the contextual advice. Sometimes we may not want to give information in, while they're driving, because it could be destructive. We might want to give it at the end of their driving, so it's like a summary. So that's why all these different contexts is very important for us to know, right? So we have some papers on the algorithms that we have developed in extracting risky driving behavior and the context of driving. So I can talk about this next time. This is another project. We have a project on indoor localization and behavior analytics. So we've got huge access to huge logs from Westfield. So people connected to the public Wi-Fi, we have access to that logs, and we sort of try to understand, their behavior. And one key takeaway from this is really the context. The indoor context is so important because it actually influences their behavior. So one of the things here, for example, skip that. Human really is a creature of habit. We found that in repeated visits, people tend to visit similar location. For example, this guy, this is the usual trajectory, and repeated visit, he will follow similar trajectory. At the same time, the content they access online is also similar, and it has a high correlation, a high positive correlation. And at the same time, another user could walk this way, and in that way, we could actually start predicting. We said we can start profiling people and also predicting their next location, for example, and start pushing recommendation to users. I'll just skip that. What else can I talk about? Right, I think I'll just conclude. I think there's a lot of possibilities of big data for urban computing. And for me, for example, there's a lot of unfinished business. Like if you look at, for example, that Westfield project, we haven't gone into the recommendation business, so that will be the next thing we like to do when we start pushing recommendation to user and pushing it in different channels. So it could be on the phone, it could be on the display, and let's see what happens. We want to start exploring those interactional opportunities as well, and sort of behavior that they are changing based on all this different information being pushed to the users. So for me, there's always value in all this data, but the most important thing is contextualize it. So since I did my PhD until now, I think it's very important for us to actually understand what is the context of the data being generated. Even data from smartphones, one pattern could be varied from one pattern to another. Just take one example. The data, let's say, magnetometer in your phone, it could be used to localize you, right? For example, it may not be able to tell directly that you are in this room, but when you're actually on public transport, when you're in a tram, it will spike. It can start contextualizing where you are, right? Changes in, let's say, your barometric pressure. It may tell how many people actually are around you. So those are some of the things that we're doing right now. I've got PhD students looking at occupancy recognition. I've got PhD students looking at mobility monitoring and change detection in mobility, using all kind of data, either smartphones or infrastructure data from, let's say, Wi-Fi. So the last question is, again, we have to think about what sort of value will this big data give us. So it's not solution looking for problems. That's what you say. So we need to think about the problem for my solution. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.